Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Restored to More. You are going to be so blessed by today's guest, Lyschel Burket.
Lyschel Burket has been working with women since 2008 as they take steps towards healing and their pursuit of God. She has facilitated support groups specific to partners of sex addicts since 2013, both locally in Knoxville, Tennessee, and online through Vicky Teed Ministries. In 2018, Lyschel founded Hope Redefined. She desires to be a part of something bigger than herself as she continues to expand the reach of support for women who are facing similar things to her own recovery story. She and her husband, Garen, have 5 kids and have been on the road of recovery since 2006. Welcome, Lyschel. We're so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you, guys. I'm thankful to be here.
Well, I know that we know your story, but would you mind sharing with our listeners who maybe don't know the background of your history a little bit? Can you share with us your personal story of betrayal?
Sure. Yeah. So, so my husband and I have been married for 17 years, and his struggles with, specifically with online porn was disclosed to me about 18 months into our marriage. But I think it's always important as a part of my story is to share a little bit of my family of origin, because it really impacted the way that my healing process took place. Um, I grew up in a family. My parents divorced when I was very young, and actually, my parents divorced because of my dad's infidelity.
Wow.
And then, as I grew up and was a young girl, the phrase I use is the visual consumption of women was very normal in my family of origin. So there were magazines in places. There was, it was not unusual to have crude jokes about women or, treating women inappropriately. People, my dad might be rolling down the window and screaming at a woman on the road because he thinks she's hot. Like, this was very normal for me.
Wow.
I didn't have any other kind of definition. And so I will tell you that as I started dating my husband, which we've known each other longer than we haven't at this point, because we went to high school together, but we started dating in college. And I just remember thinking, gosh, he's not like that. Like, he's very different from other guys. Or from the men that I had around me. So it was one of the things that attracted me to him. So we actually dated for 7 years. We had a long distance relationship. I moved a lot from my first job around the country. And so that, just created that distance for us. But we got married, and I was living in Tennessee. So he moved to Tennessee, and 18 months into our marriage, like I said, he ended up confessing after we had gone to a church service, and a guy had gotten up and shared his testimony during the service. And I was a new believer. I should also mention that I didn't have Jesus when I was growing up. I became a believer when I was about 26. So just before we got married. And so I was still getting used to hearing people share messy, talk about hard things, that kind of thing. And I know that still doesn't always happen in church, but on this particular Sunday it did. And so anyway, this guy shared his story, and we got in the car, and we knew him from our community group. And so I just got in the car. I was like, wow, that was amazing. Like, he was so like vulnerable and like just real about that. And then it was like that moment I was like, well, like, you don't struggle with that, right? And he goes, no. And I was like, yeah, I didn't think so. And that was truly as much of the conversation as I thought was going to happen. So we go home that afternoon, and later that evening, I remember he came into the kitchen and he said, I need to talk to you about something. And he began to confess that he, in fact, did feel convicted, and that he had been struggling with online porn for many years. And so he wanted to go join the group that this guy was promoting at church. And so I said, great, go join the group. And so I will tell you that that moment, I didn't feel betrayal. I didn't feel trauma in that moment. And I think it was because I didn't understand it. And I was so thankful that he wanted to go do a group, right? So I was just like, awesome. And so my interpretation was, you're going to go to this group, you're going to get fixed, and then we'll never talk about this again.
Perfect.
Great. Yeah. And so that isn't how the story went, which is true for a lot of women. And so he did start the group, but 4 months later, he went on a work trip and he ended up relapsing. He did come home and he confessed. And that is when trauma set in for me. That is when the betrayal was real, because essentially at that point, I was like, no, that can't be happening because you said you weren't going to do that anymore. That's why you're going to this group. It wasn't lining up. The betrayal was setting in. And so that's when my trauma, my behaviors, my brokenness really started to surface and take over in a lot of really unhealthy ways for me. I became incredibly paranoid. I would have anxiety attacks. I remember I would not change in front of him. I would hide in my closet, would not change my clothes in front of him. I just couldn't make sense of what was happening. And so the only thing I knew to do was to protect myself in these various ways, which in a lot of those ways was really unhealthy. So I knew relatively quickly that I needed some sort of help because I wasn't doing well emotionally. And by the grace of God, he had put a woman in my path that I remembered that she had shared publicly a bit about her own walk with her husband's addiction. So I reached out to this lady and I got the opportunity to be in community with her and with other women. And we didn't necessarily talk just about our husband's sexual addictions. And I should go back and tell you that my husband's addiction wasn't just limited to online pornography. That was what was confessed to begin with. But over the course of time, there was other behaviors that eventually came out. And so so I joined I'm in this community with these women, and I'm really starting to discover myself. And I'm starting to discover my relationship with God. And so it was just a true gift. And I will say that my husband was kind of on his own journey over there. And there were days where I thought, wow, he's really thriving. And then there were many, many days where I was like, does he even know who God is? Like, I know he's going to group, but his demeanor doesn't seem any different. His behaviors, it's just still very broken. So that community was a real gift to me to be able to just go and be. And that's what I needed, was to just go and be. So we navigated a bit of that journey for 5 years. And then 5 years into our marriage, or 5 years into his sobriety, sorry. So it was 7 years in our marriage. He had a major relapse and he got caught looking at work. And he had been looking at it for 3 months, and he worked for the government. And so they,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So they told him he was going to lose his job. And so at that point, just to give you reference of our family life, we had 3 children at this point. We had a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old.
Wow.
And, I can look back now and see why Garen relapsed, but it still didn't make it feel any different. Right. Yeah. And so we had actually established a boundary at that several years before that relapse, that if he ever used again, we had boundaries. And the boundary was that he was going to leave. And so he did, in fact, he came home after he knew he was going to lose his job. He came home and he confessed that night, and he said, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to pack my bag and go. And I didn't say a whole lot of anything. I just said, actually, what I did say was, I said, it's a real bummer, is the word I used. And I know now that what God was doing with me was he was healing me, because in the past, when my husband would have a slip up or he would screw up, it felt very personal. And so my response to him was very like, just like ready to come at you. And this time I had so much disappointment for him. Right. So I knew that I was going to be okay. And even though I didn't know what it was going to look like I remember that night, like he walked out of that house. And I know every woman who has ever experienced this knows that feeling. Like, he walked out of that house and I literally fell to a ball in the middle of our kitchen. And I just cried and I cried. And I was like, I just asked the Lord, I'm like, how are you going to rescue my best friend? Because he's drowning in something that I don't have any control over. So we navigated that separation, that season of separation. He eventually came back home, and we did an in-home separation for 3 months. Mostly for the sake of parenting and our small children and everything else. And we attempted to do some therapy in there, but it was kind of a train wreck. We weren't with a very good therapist. The therapist was really concerned about my behaviors and the way that I was stressing my husband out. So he wanted to know what was wrong with my stress levels that was projecting on my husband, which would then result in his behaviors. Right. So, And I hear this a lot now with the work that I do, but in the season, all I knew was I don't like you and I'm not coming back here.
Yeah, for sure.
You're like, I am not the reason why here,
exactly. Buddy. That was about all the truth I had in the moment. So, yeah, but after that season and the dust started settling is a bit what I say is, the Lord started calling me to share my story. And my original response was, no, I am not doing that because I'm not fixed. We're not fixed. I don't have this like really great whatever look to it. There's still a lot of pain in it. There was so much growth for us to still do, and still do this day. But the Lord was just very adamant. And he was like, all I want you to do is to create a safe place for another woman. And I was like, well, I can do that. Like I can be safe. And so I approached my church with fear and trembling, asked them if I could start a group. They gave me a yes, which just blew me away. I knew it was the Lord going before me because I thought, I don't even know if half the church knew I was there for the first 3 years. Like it was just like, he just moved me in and created this space and I got to do it with women. And so, yeah. And so then I met Vicky Titi, and she's an author of a book that I really respect, and created a relationship with her. I actually came in as a group member. And after I was finished with the first group, she asked me if I would consider facilitating with her groups, because she was busy homeschooling kids and doing speaking engagements and all these things. And I was like, sure, I'm already doing groups. Why not? So I started doing that, and I did it for about 7 years. I would go back and forth between having live groups at our church and doing groups online. And then 3.5 years ago, the Lord said, okay, it's time to make this a full-time thing. Wow. And again, I said no. Did not want to do this all the time. He's really okay with my no.
Here. I know. It's good.
I think it's a game Moses. Yeah, I know. It's totally.
I tell people I know it's the Holy Spirit when my first reaction is no. No. I know. Yes. I know it's not my flesh. If it's like no, that's not. I'm not doing.
Correct. Yeah. Or when you stand in the shower and you go, Lord, this was a really bad idea. Are you sure? Like, yeah. Yeah. So
definitely relate.
Yeah. So in 2018, there was a lot that went into knowing that this was exactly what God was asking me to do. But in 2018, we launched Hope Redefined as a nonprofit ministry to specifically support women facing betrayal.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you said yes to the call in your life, because I know that I've been directly impacted. I know we've been impacted. I know other women who have been impacted by you not only sharing your story, but giving other resources to women just that they can hold on to hope and be able to be transformed. I think that's a big one. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'd love to hear more about the separation that you guys did. And I think, first off, I love what you shared. I love how you just painted that picture of you knew you would be okay. And that's a lot of internal work. That's a Holy Spirit thing where there's a peace. There's still sadness. There's still a brokenness over it, but there's this peace that you're going to be okay. And I appreciate you sharing that. Can you tell us more about that, about what that was like? And, you guys had decided for separation beforehand. I mean, just elaborate on that whole area, if you will.
Yeah. Yes. So you're absolutely right, Clinton. There was a lot of personal work that was happening on my side for me personally that I needed to do that I didn't know the Lord was like setting me up. Right. And so he was preparing me for this season without me obviously understanding. And so I had been spending so much time really digging into who I am in Christ. Because that is really what held me together. When after that, I remember that next morning, I have a journal entry where I wrote, you love my kids more than I do. Right. And so, because ultimately, what are all the fears that start flooding you when you're in that situation? It was like, we're going to be homeless. My husband's losing his job. I'm not working. I was, staying home with our kids at the time. I'm like, I can't recover from this financially fast enough. And all the things, just the devastation that I was anticipating. And then it was like, I had to find that peace with the Lord. And so I wrote in the journal entry, I wrote, I know that you love my kids more than I do. And so what I know to be true is that we will not be living in a ditch. Right. And like, that was like my worst case scenario. So all I had to do was just
Ditches are pretty bad. Ditches kind of suck.
Ditches
For
are
sure.
horrible.
I can see that being a bad deal.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, my worst case scenario was living in a ditch with my 3 children at the time. Right. And I was like, okay, he's not going to let that happen. And so I had to start at the most catastrophic thought process and just start backing it up and being like, what does your word say that I can hold on to that is true?
Yeah.
So I will tell you that what then transformed, so I don't know if I've said this on other interviews or not, is the next day, the Lord asked me, I was just trying to spend some time in worship in my room. And it just so happened the 2 big girls had gone to mom's day out. The baby was down for a nap. I'm in my bedroom. And the Lord, I just felt a prompting to start writing the promises of God. Right. And so I was like, because that was where my strength was going to come from, is that your word says this. So if this is what it says and it's true, I'm going after it. So I started writing it down. I had a notebook. I started writing it down the notebook, and I felt like the Lord was like, we're going bigger. We're going bigger. And I was like, bigger. And the next thing I know, I have a piece of kids chalk in my hand, and I literally graffitied our entire bedroom.
Wow.
And I wrote everything that I felt like moved in my soul on those walls.
Wow.
And I had things like, I can remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I had worship music going on. So a lot of it was coming even just from the lyrics that I was listening to. And so there was one that was, I break every chain. And so I had that over our doorway. I had, teach me your ways, O Lord, your everlasting Father, you're this, you're that. And so it was just like, he literally was helping me cover myself in his truths. And so the hilarity of that story, I guess it's hilarity, is that I forgot to tell my husband right, that I had done this. So he's been moved out of the house. And so all of a sudden he moves back in and I forgot. He goes upstairs to take a shower. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's about to go. I'm waiting for him to tell me that he's mad, totally. Right? And I walk in there and he is just standing there in total awe. And he started to cry, which is not something he does often. And he said, I go, are you mad? And he goes, no, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And he said, I really prayed a lot that God was taking care of you because I didn't know how. And he goes, but this was such proof that he was. Like, here he was taking care of you. And I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I was like, so like, God's definitely taking care of me. You don't have to worry about it. But we ended up leaving those words up for 3 years.
Wow.
Because we needed them. We needed them to navigate healing. We needed those truths to just continue to resonate in our hearts. So when you talk about that self-care and what was needed in that season, it was, I mean, yes, I needed things that we talk about often in group and community. Like, I needed to find safe support. I needed to have the ability to break away from my kids and just grieve. I needed to do all those things, but this was one of those things where I had to just press into what I knew to be true. And that's what I did. So
that's amazing. You know, I think one of the things I thought about when you were sharing is it's so important to hold on to God's promises and his truth, because everything else in our life, we are questioning the truth. We're questioning what's real, what's not. And so when you're in such an unstable mindset, you need his promises and his truth to make you stable and to remind you of who you are, where you're going, what's truth, what's not, so that you can be like, okay, like my Father's got me, you know, or otherwise, like, I don't understand, honestly, personally, how you can go through healing and come out of it stronger without Christ, in my opinion, because he was like my rock in it. So I love that visual, and I love God just meeting you there. It's just that was just a beautiful, beautiful story. And, you know, I think another thing too is a lot of women, I think, are scared, or maybe, I'm not even really sure. Maybe it's just that feeling of like a lack of worthiness, you know, of being able to take care of themselves. But I think in the beginning, it's not the easiest transition to start taking care of yourself, you know, and having those self-care moments. A lot of women reach out to me and I just hear just emotionally, physically, spiritually, just tapped out, you know, and just so worried about what their significant other is doing or what they're not doing. and so wrapped up in him. Yet what I hear you doing in your stories, you did such a good job at just taking care of you. Like, yes, there was probably moments where you were worried, stressed out, freaked out about what he was doing, but you're like, no, I need to set up healthy boundaries. I need to have worship music on. I need to take care of me. I need to go to community. I need groups. I need, therapists or whatnot. There's all these things that you decided to put into place because you knew that you just need to take care of yourself. And God, I think there comes this point where you just kind of have to surrender the other person and their healing process, or it's gonna just like take you down.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you I feel like that was a reason why I believe you healed in such a miraculous way. It's because you focused on those things. Would you say that's true?
I would also tell you that self-care, that wisdom didn't come until after I did it really bad to begin with. Right.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I would tell you that I was 100% addicted to my husband's addiction. And I spent probably the first 2.5 years managing, just freaking out. I mean, I have stories where there were moments where I would drive past the church to see if his car was there because he said he was going to group, and I'm not so sure he's going to group. And so I'd drive past the group, and there was just so much need for me to find safety. I mean, that's really what I was doing, right? Even though it was controlling and on the outside, it appears to be straight up crazy. What I was trying to do was I never wanted to experience that pain again.
Yeah.
So I was going to do whatever I could to try and make that not happen.
Yeah.
And so, and that was that, you're absolutely right. It was like this, well, God gave me this picture of like, I had like these talons in my husband's neck, right? I was just like, don't you dare move or mess this up again, because I won't live through it. And so as I began to get this invitation to surrender my husband and let God be in charge of his recovery and let God be in charge of my healing, it started to change. And when I say that, a lot of times I'll have women go, well, I can't just like let him go. I'm like, girl, I got it. I mean, I thought I was going to stop breathing if you told me to stop, being in charge of his stuff, because the truth is that I thought if I stop managing this, my husband's going to check out and he's going to go so bad. He's going to go so far down darkness that he'll never come back.
Yeah.
And then I'm abandoned all over again. Right.
Yep.
And yet the Lord just started teaching me other things. Like, so what I could do that was so proactive was legitimately to be sitting in this element of warfare. Right. And just leaning into the Lord to teach me how to fight for my husband versus like, I'm like doing this strangling motion versus fighting my husband.
Yeah.
How do I fight for him versus fight him?
Oh, that's so good.
And so, and I always get anxious when I say that, because I think that so many of us, women in particular, have been handed a prescription that says just pray harder. And that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just saying, hey, just be passive about this and whatever. Like, God doesn't call us to be passive. He calls us to live a life in abundance. And so that's what I'm talking about, is how do you discover abundance for yourself?
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. So,
I love that you say that, because I think it's important for the guys, because I know we have both, a lot of couples listen to this. And I think it's really important the guys remember that if their wife is having that controlling state of checking the phone every 2 minutes, or driving past your group, or wanting to put the Life 360 app on your phone to check your every move, again, it's just a reminder again that it's not because, I mean, it really is, it's just for safety is what I just want to reiterate. It's for safety, because I think it's easy to get frustrated at that, or go, stop controlling me, or stop keeping tabs on everything I'm doing. Like, literally, I just have $1 of cash, and Charity's like, can you please give me the $1? Or like, where's the change? It says on the receipt you spent $18.75 and I gave you a 20. Where's the 125 back from? Because let's get real. We know that is what we do. We save up $1 for 8 months to have enough money to go pay for a stripper or whatever it is. And so that's a normal thing. And so what our wives are doing is going, hey, I am trying to be safe here. And it does feel overbearing. But I think as guys, we need to accept that, going, okay, I realize it's coming out of a need for safety, not just because you're a control freak. And I think it's really important for us to remember that. And just because I think it's easier to accept it. It's easier to have empathy towards her when we realize it's out of safety and not out of control.
Yeah, because I'm going to tell you, my controlling behaviors are rooted in fear, right? So I'm scared.
It's true.
Yep.
That's why I'm asking for the dollar change, right? I'm scared. And so what I was wanting from my husband, but he didn't know this, right? And his own, immaturity of emotional intelligence, he did not know that that's what I was wanting. And honestly, I didn't have those words either.
Totally.
I couldn't say to him, I'm scared. Like that was way too vulnerable, right? Even for me to get there, but I couldn't even tell you if I knew that that's what was happening for me. So it's true. And it's like, just like you said, it's like, encouraging men just to say, I think what she's doing, like, even if he can't say it to her face, that if he could let down the guard, right? Because that's a bit what happens is like they put up the guard and the justification and the angst that comes with being controlled. And it's like, actually, she just needs me to reassure her.
Yeah.
That's what she needs.
You talk about the difference between sobriety and recovery. And I would love to hear your input on that and just your mindset around the differences between those two.
Yeah. I love talking about this. So, so I've learned that from our own story and then from working with women so long that there is a very clear distinction between sobriety and recovery. And so sobriety is, I'm not going to do that behavior anymore. That behavior that's causing me problems or that people are saying don't do. Sobriety is abstaining from that behavior, right? So sobriety is what some would call behavior modification. I'm not going to do that anymore. And oftentimes I will see guys who will go through their healing. They're going to go through their journey and they manage to master sobriety. And so the way this sounds in a relationship is they'll go, she's upset. She's wanting connection with him is really what she's wanting. So she's like, you don't ever talk to me. I don't know what's going on. I just wish that you would, fill me in. What's going on inside your head? And he's going, why are you so insecure? I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. That's him talking about his sobriety. I haven't looked at porn in 90 days, blah, right? So he's got this level of sobriety and that should repair everything. And honestly, that's just the beginning of every individual's healing process.
Yeah.
Recovery is about learning how to do something altogether new.
Yeah.
And so recovery is, for him, recovery looks like getting into space, whether that's therapy or groups or whatever, and beginning to understand what is empathy. How do I extend empathy to another person? How do I relate to her and go, gosh, I hear your pain. Or I can see that you're afraid because you're trying to control. Like there's so many new ways of us connecting emotionally, but we all know that at the root, the cause of sexual addiction is the avoidance of intimate emotions, right? I don't want to feel sad. So when I feel sad, I immediately go find something to make me not feel sad. That's what we're doing. We're exchanging it. And so what we do in sobriety is we are still feeling sad, but now we're just white knuckling it. I feel sad. Like we're like, I don't know what to do with myself. Right. But he's like, but I'm not going to go do that thing because that's going to get me in trouble. Recovery is sadness is still going to be there, but now I'm going to learn how to do sadness different. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to put it in its place. I'm going to hang out with it if I need to, all those things. And so that's really that's for me, it's such a beautiful, I love giving couples or women even the ability to say what you're asking for, because they will get frustrated. Like we talk about this a lot in community. Like they're frustrated that the husband won't emotionally connect with them. She's like, I don't understand. He hasn't been doing this for a year. Like, but why can he not just emotionally connect with me? And I'm going, because he hasn't entered recovery yet. And the recovery is learning how to do that with another person. It's stepping into that intimate space and being able to connect.
So good.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh. Everything that you're saying, we're just like
yes and
we're
amen.
a bobblehead. We're like,
preach,
just like,
preach.
keep going. Can we just talk to you every day and just, this is just so good. And we believe in everything that you're saying. And we love that. And we talk to a lot of couples because, both sides of the couples are just going through a lot and very different things, yet similar things at the same time. And so what normally happens is the guy will get, frustrated at the girl, and we're always just trying to educate them like, hey, just because you're going to groups, and you're seeing growth, it doesn't mean that's going to equal intimacy. Like sobriety is great, being able to, not be in that anymore is amazing, but that doesn't equal intimacy. And so we're always trying to educate couples like there's so many other aspects that go into that, and it's knowing and learning how to do life with the significant other, letting them into those feelings, being intimate with them, because intimacy, is not just sexual. There's so many other levels of intimacy, and trying to educate them on learning how to do those. So we are like, yes, everything you're saying, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, sobriety is necessary. Like, I don't want anybody to hear me say that. Like, you really can't work on that rebuilding, that recovery until you've experienced sobriety.
Yeah.
And that is another hang up that happens for couples, is that he never has a good stretch of sobriety to really get into the mindset of saying, I want to learn how to do this different.
Yeah.
And so it feels like a very long, drawn out, frustrating process, but it's like the sobriety has to happen, and then the intimacy starts, that recovery season starts to take place. But
an analogy, we were talking with a couple recently and just kind of doing some coaching, and we were saying that, like, we live near the beach, and so what we see is kids trying to build a sandcastle all the time, and the tide coming up and washing it away. And what has to happen is they have to build this moat or a wall that keeps that tide from knocking over the sandcastle. And I think what happens is that for us is the sobriety portion. The sobriety portion is building a wall so that then you can build a castle, because you can't really have the castle without the wall. Otherwise the relapses will keep knocking it out. And so when you create the sobriety and you build that wall, when it's big enough, it actually keeps the tide at bay. And now it doesn't mean you have anything on the sand. You don't have a castle built. You have no intimacy built or relational connection or emotional capacity, but now you can actually build that with your spouse, and you can keep that at bay. And so they're two different things, but like you're saying, sobriety has to happen. Otherwise you cannot build something substantial. But you also can't jump into just building the wall and then expect the castle just come up out of nowhere. That doesn't happen either. And so there are two different things that are needed for sure. And so we relate to that 100%.
Yeah, totally.
Well, could you let us know? We want to dive into Hope Redefined.
My goodness, yes.
Tell our listeners how they can learn more about Hope Redefined and what it offers for women.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we're a nonprofit, so we're a 501c3 organization. We support women actually in 6 different ways, technically. And I know that sounds overwhelming, but truly the purpose behind that is that we want to be able to let women navigate their healing in the way that is right for them. So we don't believe that there's this A plus B equals C for every single woman. And every woman comes in with different needs. So the way that we support women is we do online support groups, and we have multiple different types of groups. We have some that are for, I'm just stepping into recovery. I've never done anything like this before. And so it's a good overview group. We have a group that specifically focuses in on boundaries, what they are, how do you create them, how do you effectively communicate them, what happens if they're totally crossed. Because the truth is that none of us know how to do boundaries. That is not a class we get in high school. That's like, hey, let's teach you how to do boundaries with the world. And that was really frustrating for me in my own story. It was like, I loved Townsend and Cloud, and I'd get the book, and I've read it 3 times, and I would go, this is the most amazing idea. I have no idea how to make this happen in my life. Right. So that's where this group kind of was birthed from. And I got to work with my friend Kat Etherington through the Naked Truth Project. And so she had done a lot of this, and then we got to come in and add things to it and create a course that goes for 10 weeks. And then we've got more groups coming in other topic areas. So anyways, we do groups, we do one-to-one coaching support. We've got several coaches that are part of our ministry that we love to support women one-on-one. We even do disclosure support. So women who are looking to do a therapeutic disclosure, they really do need some support and help in preparing for that type of event. And so that's one of the things that we do as a special place of support, but we also just do coaching around betrayal. We have an online community called Hope Online, and it is completely separate from any social media. It's its own entity. You have an app on your phone, and it's amazing. There's right now, I think we have 100 women in there. and we stuff it every month with professional content. So I'm writing stuff. We've got another gal, part of our team. Her name's Marisha. She's writing stuff, and we pick a topic every month. So like this month, I wrote a lot about restoration and the distinction between worldly and biblical restoration, because they're very different. And then we're, and also talking about how reconciliation and restoration don't come together, even though we think they should, right? But just really talking about how God will restore you as an individual, even if your marriage doesn't have reconciliation in it.
Yes.
So we've got a lot of great topics in there. And then our fourth service is we do a retreat twice a year. It's called Redeemed Hope. It's an intensive healing retreat. It lasts for 3 days. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We host it outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. It is the most incredible experience I've ever witnessed. And I know I sound biased, but seriously, I feel like it's a surprise party every time for me. The sweetest thing about this, what the heart behind creating this retreat was, I was a mom with young kids and never really had the space to step out of that and be able to sit with the truth of this story. I could go to another women's weekend, a women's conference, whatever, but it wasn't necessarily around this topic. And so I missed that. I really wanted to be able to have permission and space to sit with my betrayal and unpack it, look at it for a minute and be like, Lord, what are you going to do with this? And so that is a bit of that is part of the heart that's behind this retreat. And we actually do it as we do it as a 1-to-1. So we limit the retreat to 12 women, and then there's 12 team members that are there. And we do a lot of 1-to-1 ministry time. So we give women time and space to go process, and then they come back and they sit with a woman or maybe two, and they go through particular exercises together. And part of that retreat is we even press into generational strongholds and things that have been handed down to us from lineages, just things before, and how we as daughters of the King get to decide that today's the day that's not going to keep going. Right. And so it's really powerful. It's the most amazing weekend. So we do that twice a year. And then we also, another way that we serve women is we have a scholarship fund. And so as a nonprofit, we have the ability to raise funds for them. And we know, because we've already lived this story, that resources can be very limited when it comes to her getting support. And so we work to create scholarships and help women get through the services and support they need. So those are the ways that we support them. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
It's a one-stop shop.
Well,
yeah,
I don't know about
really
that.
cool.
I will not say that. I will always say this. I love referring to everybody. I love being a networker. And so it's like, so I even love that. Like if a woman reaches out to us, she has no idea what she wants, I'm going to be the first person to be like, okay, none of our stuff's going to work for you, but this girl, like go to this lady, because she's going to be amazing. So, and I enjoy that.
That's cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
So tell us the dates of your retreat, because I think one's coming up, correct?
Oh, yes. So our next retreat is actually the weekend of March 26th.
Cool.
Through 28th. Yeah. And we have 4 spots left. So.
And they can sign up on your website, correct?
On our website, hoperedefined.org.
Perfect.
So awesome.
We'll have all that in the show notes for all the listeners who are listening, and then they can just click on over and check out everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that app that you guys are doing. That sounds really cool. It sounds like a unique niche that you guys are hitting on, and that's not connected to the social media apps that we're going to and that can even be triggering, but it's its own group. So it's a safe place for these women to go to, and it sounds like build community, get a lot of learning and teaching education. That sounds like it's a fantastic tool you guys have created.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We're really excited about it.
And I'm assuming they can learn about all these things at hoperedefined.org. Is that correct?
Yep.
Cool.
It's all out there. Yeah.
Wow.
And I want to read it one more time, but I am so blessed by everything that you're doing, and specifically also just what you're providing for women. You know, I think women just want that safe place. They want a community. And sometimes, like you're saying, not everybody is supposed to fit into this box. You know, all of us are going to heal differently. And I remember part of my story and my journey is I remember just feeling like I'm in a different place than these other women in my group, but I didn't know where to go because I felt like I wanted to learn, because you have groups. I think one of them is called Finding Hope, which is like a beginner's. And then you have the living living hope. And
Mhm.
I wanted that next step, but I had felt like I needed to stay there because there's nothing else there for me yet. I was feeling left triggered more so than when I was going in. I was feeling hopeful. I was feeling excited because we were working it out. Yet I was feeling triggered because it just wasn't meeting me where I needed to be met anymore.
Yeah.
And I love that you are about like, hey, like if this is for you, then come here, but like if you're at a different place, then plug into this one.
Yeah.
And I just think that is so needed for women so that they don't stay stuck and that they can
Right.
move on to a next season. I believe that's the kind of God that we have. Is he is a restorative God, and he wants to restore us and make us better than new, which means we're not staying plugged in and stuck in a group for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our life. He wants us to be made new and transformed and moving on and having hope and giving other people hope. And we can't do that if we
Yeah.
just keep on going to the same thing. So I love that
Yeah.
you're providing tools and resources for women to be able to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Totally agree, Charity. It's amazing. Yeah. So we do enjoy that. And I, I agree. And I saw, as I was doing the group for so long, I just did Finding Hope for years. And each time we would get to the end of that 8 weeks and women would go, so now what?
Yeah.
And I go, I don't know, now what? And, it's like, and unfortunately, a lot of us think, oh, I'm going to go to this 8-week group and then I'll be done. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. But then once the 8-week group starts to unfold and they start to see the depth of this, they're like, oh, wow, I have a lot that I need to still process through. And so that is the heart, is that we hope to just continue to be that safe community for them, that wherever they are. I mean, we have women who come in and the only thing they do for the longest time is they're in the Hope Online community, because that's as much capacity as they have right now.
Yeah.
And that is completely fine. And we want to make sure that that's a good space for them. We have other women who come in and they've literally gone through every group they can possibly get into, and they're just, sucking it in. It's crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, then everything in between. So that is our heart, and our hope is to be able to help them navigate whatever they need in their own healing journey.
Love that.
So, yeah.
Well, Lyschel, thank you so much for being on the Restore to More podcast. We're so excited to stay connected to what you guys are doing. And we're just grateful that you were willing to spend the time with us and our listeners and add the value that you did. You added a lot of value and a lot of mindset that I know is going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.